Normal people, healthy people, they wake up and they do stuff, right? When you have an autoimmune disease, from the moment that your eyes open, your brain spends majority of its time thinking about what am I about to do and how am I going to do it? And I'm not talking about I'm going to go build a house. I'm talking about I'm going to go get up and put my socks on. I'm talking about brushing my teeth. That's not a normal life. And so not only is it painful physically, but it's painful emotionally to be full of life and to be full of energy and to want to do a million things and you can't.
Autoimmune disease as a whole probably affects, I think the last quote I heard was fourth leading cause of mortality in women as a whole. But what happens is we have rheumatoid arthritis, we have multiple sclerosis, we have lupus, we have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and each one of those things, even though the mechanism underlying the process is the same, they're seeing a rheumatologist, they're seeing a neurologist, they're seeing a gastroenterologist, they're seeing an endocrinologist, and these silos are happening and they're doing their own thing and they're not talking and they're treating the same underlying thing.
Hi, and welcome back to Proven, Healing Breakthroughs Backed by Science. I'm Nick Palizzi, and this episode is going to be a double feature of sorts. 25 years ago, the term gut health wasn't something that was commonly spoken of in mainstream medical circles. Neither was the term autoimmune disease. They were simply not on our radar. Now they become household terms in the world of health and wellness. Why? Because the science is in and the major medical centers of the world are beginning to understand that many chronic diseases, including most autoimmune diseases, begin in your gut. In fact, your gut is a far more powerful system than we were told in school. When you think about your digestive tract, the primary function that probably comes to mind is digesting food and turning it into energy that can be used by your body. But did you know that your gut A, produces essential nutrients needed by your brain and body, B, has its own separate nervous system with millions of neurons, and C, houses a plethora of microorganisms that outnumber the actual cells in your body by a lot? In this episode, you're going to be introduced to some revolutionary concepts that you might have never known of before, and you'll come away feeling empowered and in the know about how to take care of your gut and prevent diseases from ever starting in the first place. But before we dive into our 5 breakthrough solutions for gut issues and autoimmune disease, it's important to set the groundwork by better understanding 1, what an autoimmune disease actually is, and 2, how the colonies of trillions of tiny organisms in your gut, aka your microbiome, play a huge role in either preventing or causing illness.
All disease, all chronic inflammatory diseases. Well, is that diabetes? Yes. Well, is that Alzheimer's? Yes. Well, is that Parkinson's? Yes. Well, is that rheumatoid arthritis? Yes. Is that MS? Yes. Is that chronic fatigue? Yes. Is that chemical sensitivity? Yes. All chronic diseases begin in the gut.
The human microbiome is the microbes that cover our outside and our inside. It's the bacteria, the viruses, the fungi in our gut, but also in our skin, on our skin, in our nose, in our mouth, in our eyes, and in our bloodstream. So there's more of them than there are of us.
Are we humans with a lot of bacteria? Or are we bacteria having a human experience? And that sounds kind of weird, but if you look at the numbers, they outnumber us 10 to 1. The bacterial cells in our body, 10 times more than the number of human cells. But the genes control function. They outnumber us 100 to 1. Who's modulating? Who's controlling the steering wheel of how our bodies function? It's the bacteria. All of this bacteria together has generated who we are and how we think and how we communicate and how we respond to stress, how we respond to happiness. It's all modulated by our microbiome. When we take care of our microbiomes, we are really happy bodies, functioning well, living life, sleeping well, lots of energy, lots of vitality. When we don't take care of our microbiome, we don't feel good. Translational research, meaning research that changes the way you think, because it's correct and it changes the way you think. The average is 17 years from the time the papers are published before the doc down the street is using the information. 17 years. King's College in London. 1978. I remember it was my first genetics class, and the professor came in holding a paper, just really excited, said, this was just published this week. And it was Alan Ebringer. He was a graduate student at the time, and he was publishing that if you carried the gene HLA-B27, and it's a gene that about a third of the Western population has, if you carry that gene and you get a Klebsiella pneumoniae infection, that's a bacteria. It's the most common cause of pneumonia in hospitals is Klebsiella. So if you have the gene HLA-B27 and a Klebsiella infection, you are at high risk of developing ankylosing spondylitis. This was the first paper ever that I'm aware of, and my genetics professor at the time was aware of, demonstrating what's called molecular mimicry. Now, molecular mimicry is one of the more common mechanisms behind the development of autoimmune diseases, where they come from. If you have a Klebsiella infection, your immune system, trying to protect you, goes after that Klebsiella. You make antibodies to Klebsiella. And these antibodies are like special forces. They've got high-powered rifles. You don't mess with these guys. They've been trained. Look for the protein signature of Klebsiella. It's like Klebsiella is wearing an orange vest. And the vest is an amino acid structure, the protein structure. So special forces are going through the bloodstream everywhere looking for an orange vest. It just so happens that the proteins in the surface of the joints in the spine kind of look like orange vests. So if you carry the gene HLA-B27, it looks more like an orange vest. And these special forces going after Klebsiella can start attacking your spine. And you get all this calcium laid in there, all the inflammation as a result of the special forces firing their rifles at your spine because it's got the orange vest. And you get all this calcium in there, and that's ankylosing spondylitis. That was the first, Alan Ebringer's paper, 1978. But now he's published on Proteus, and that's another bacteria, and rheumatoid arthritis. Most every rheumatoid patient we ever work with and we help to turn around, they've got bacterial infections, and the immune system trying to protect you is going after the bacteria, but because of their genes, it also attacks their joints. They get rheumatoid. With MS, there's different bacteria, and you attack myelin. They get MS. So that's called molecular mimicry, and that's one of the more common mechanisms of which autoimmune disease development begins. There's a component of your brain and your nervous system called aquaporin 4. Those fibers in your nerves, aquaporin 4, have a protein signature very similar to the aquaporin 4 in spinach, corn, tomato, and soy. If you have a sensitivity to spinach, corn, tomato, or soy, you are at much higher risk of developing antibodies to aquaporin 4. If you develop antibodies to aquaporin 4, that's your brain and your nervous system, and especially your eyes and your vision. So the number one cause of demyelinating diseases in the Far East is neuromyelitis optica. Well, what do they eat a lot of in the Far East? Spinach and soy. And the studies show over 75% of people with neuromyelitis optica have antibodies to spinach or soy. So your immune system isn't making a mistake in autoimmune diseases most of the time. It's trying to protect you. The question is, what's it trying to protect you from? And when you do the tests, you see, oh my gosh, I didn't know that I have this sensitivity to wheat. I mean, I feel fine when I eat wheat. We do the test and you've got sky-high antibodies to wheat. You get off of wheat and all of a sudden, your brain's working better. You're sleeping better. Your joint pains are gone. Your thyroid antibodies go down to normal. That's why this whole world of gluten sensitivity has come about, because it's not the wheat that's the problem. It's the molecular mimicry. that can occur in your body, because those symptoms can be anywhere. There is a very famous scientist. His name is Professor Alessio Fasano. He just came out with a new paper. The title of the paper, All Disease Begins in the Leaky Gut. And then he just goes through the science of the mechanisms that when you have this intestinal permeability, macromolecules, big molecules, get through into the bloodstream. So let's do this. Mrs. Patient, your intestines are a tube. The tube starts in your mouth, it goes to the other end, kind of winds around in the center there. It's about 20, 25 feet long. The inside of the tube is lined with cheesecloth. It's a tube. So when you swallow food, it's inside the tube. It's not in your body. It's inside the tube. The food has to be broken down into really, really small pieces. That's digestion, to go through the cheesecloth to get into the bloodstream. Now your body can use the vitamins and the minerals and the proteins to make new cells. After these tiny little fuel pieces can get through, they get broken down, so they can get through the cheesecloth into the bloodstream. What happens when you get tears in the cheesecloth? Bigger molecules get through before they've been broken down small enough. They're called macromolecules. And your immune system says, wait a minute, what's that? That's not something I can make new brain cells with or bone cells. I better fight that. Now you make antibodies to tomatoes or to chicken or to raspberries or to really good foods. And your doctor does a 90 food panel. It comes back and you're sensitive to 25 foods. He says, oh my God, that's everything I eat. Well, of course it is. Your immune system's trying to protect you, right? There's nothing wrong with your immune system. So what do? Stop eating the foods right now so that you don't throw more gasoline on the fire throughout your body, and heal the tears in the cheesecloth. Heal the intestinal permeability. We're getting close to it being more accepted now in everyday practice about intestinal permeability. I still sometimes come up against gastroenterologists who say there's no such thing as leaky gut. And I'll say, well, if you go to PubMed, that's the National Library of Medicine, and just type in leaky gut, you will find over 13,000 articles. Are they all wrong? So the development of autoimmune diseases, by and far, the vast majority of them require 5 things. A genetic vulnerability to that particular condition, an inflamed microbiome, the good bacteria of your gut, not enough, too much of the bad bacteria, lots of inflammation there, causing tears in the cheesecloth, intestinal permeability, causing the macromolecules to get through into the bloodstream, your immune system trying to protect you, fighting those macromolecules, and then your immune system attacking your own tissue. All disease begins in the leaky gut.
So if you have this permeability and you've lost all this protection, you activated your immune system, it's making an antibody to this one little strip of gluten. Now you have this antibody in your body that says, oh, I see that same little message on my thyroid, and now I have Hashimoto's. So that's how autoimmune gets started in the gut. Conventional world doesn't care about Hashimoto's, but people feel horrible because what happens is they're sitting with antibodies that are 2,000, which means your immune system hasn't calmed down. You're still revving up, you're still going and brewing and smoldering, and inflammation doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good. But we don't, in the conventional world, see that that's a problem. We don't deal with this. So I get a handful of Hashimoto's patients because they just don't feel good. And so they don't feel good because I haven't calmed down their immune system. If I need to calm down the immune system, I have to go through the gut. And how do I calm that down? I start building layers again. I need to build that mucus layer. I need to get that bacteria right. I need to build up and tighten up the gaps. I need to help the immune system sort of get tolerant and retrain them. By the way, the microbiome, actually, the newest, amazing information about how the microbiome talks to our immune system. And it's like the microbiome is actually schooling our immune system. And so sitting in, antibiotics really doesn't help our immune system over the long haul. And so I just literally go simplistically, I'm like, I got to fix these because that's how I'm touching your immune system. That's how you get to the immune system.
Now that we have a cursory understanding of how your gut health impacts overall health, let's dive into our first proven solution. Remember, our healing modalities are arranged in a countdown format, beginning with our number 5 therapy and ending with our number 1 therapy. Every method that we're presenting to you in the Proven series has been well vetted using a combination of hard scientific data and other more practical criteria to help us grade each one. In this next segment, we're diving into a technology that's been around for 50 years, but is only just beginning to take hold in the world of complementary and alternative medicine. It's called electromedicine, and it involves the use of safe equipment to either measure or directly treat a specific process in your body. As you're about to see, 2 forms of electromedicine, biofeedback and frequency-specific microcurrent, are quickly being embraced for their ability to heal GI distress.
Biofeedback is a technique by which you monitor what happens inside your body using all kinds of equipment or whatever, and you display it back to yourself so you can see what is happening inside in your physiology. It makes the invisible visible. It makes the undocumented documentable. And what it really shows is how mind and emotions and body are all interlinked, namely how the body affects thoughts, emotions, and vice versa. So if I explained it in a different way, when you go to the doctor and they take your blood pressure, then that is monitoring. And now the nurse or whoever it is, the medical practitioner, takes your blood pressure, they read the numbers and they write it down. They may even tell you, so now you could become aware what your blood pressure is. Biofeedback would be, repeat this, and now let's say teach the person to relax. And now you could see, take the blood pressure again, the blood pressure goes down. Whatever I am now doing made my blood pressure go down, let's say, or go up. And then slowly you could help identify strategies inside yourself by which you could have a kind of voluntary control over your physiology. There's very nice work on this, also by Dick Gewertz, showing that kids who have RAP, recurrent abdominal pain, these are these young children who have stomach pains. They go to their parents, feel totally frustrated. There's nothing they can do. They go to their physician. They can't do anything. They finally go to the gastroenterologist. Nothing seems to work. It works out is that if you teach these kids heart rate variability, which is really that slower breathing, within 6 sessions, you have an 80% success rate. Only for those children who are really driven kids, who want to perform really well. If they don't have any of that, if they're laid-back kids and they have none of that kind of striving performance, send them back to the gastroenterologist. And we just find with our college students that many people who have GI distress, recurrent abdominal pain, often even menstrual cramps, or even hot flashes, as for older women, that if you breathe more shallowly, your hot flashes tend to increase, your abdominal pain may increase, your acid reflux will probably increase. If, on the other hand, you can learn to breathe lower and slower without trying to do it, not like, but in a kind of nice, effortless way, it's remarkable how you can allow the system to regenerate. Because this slower breathing, what does it do? It inhibits or stops the alarm reaction. It reallows the peristalsis. So the first thing you hear, the gurgliness in your GI tract, which means, it's starting to work again.
So everybody wants to know what kind of machine we use in frequency-specific microcurrent. It has to be a microcurrent machine. And then we generally use alligator clips. These 2 are positive, those 2 are negative, and then you wet these wraps and place them on the patient's body. Frequency-specific microcurrent is about the frequencies, but you have to have a machine that will do what you need it to do. There's this frequency for the vagus nerve. Patient comes in an atrial fib. Well, the vagus nerve slows your heart rate. What would happen to the patient in atrial fib if we ran the frequency to increase secretions in the vagus nerve? Atrial fib went from 130 to 67 in 5 minutes. Excuse me? Then you look at the other things that the vagus nerve does. The vagus nerve quiets your immune system. It slows your heart rate, and it increases or improves your digestion. So it does all of the things that you need to do to live a healthy, normal life where you repair on a daily or regular basis. And it quiets the immune system. It shuts it off. And the brain, the midbrain, the stress centers in your brain absolutely regulate the vagus. So, if the vagus is going to make you all quiet, digest your food, lay on the couch with a slow heart rate and a really quiet immune system, that's fine unless you're being threatened, unless you're being dragged through the woods by a tiger. Gastroparesis is a medical condition where the stomach just stops working. The digestive motility just goes away. It's easy. SIBO is kind of like the new irritable bowel. Everybody's got SIBO. SIBO just means that the bacteria that should be in your large intestine climb through that sphincter that is now open because the vagus isn't working to close it. Bacteria climb through that sphincter from the large bowel. They go back the wrong way because the motility isn't shoving them the right way. They go back the wrong way, they populate the small intestine, and they create a lot of difficulties with gas and bloating and digestion. What happens if you turn the vagus back on? Motility goes back to normal, stomach acid goes back to normal, digestive enzymes go back to normal. The sphincters close. The bacteria are very pH sensitive. They don't like it when there's enough stomach acid. So when the vagus starts working, the bacteria, the wrong bacteria that are in the small bowel go, wow, it's really too hot in here, and they're gone. So the bad guys die, the good guys proliferate. And over 2 to 3 months, things go back to normal. SIBO and gastroparesis take 6, 7, 8 years of ridiculous diets, medication, antibiotics, drugs to make your gut move faster. Not 6, 7, 8 years, 6 months. If it's 6 months, I've missed something. If it's not better in 2 months, we go looking for something else like mold or some sort of parasite. But that's how it works. 80% of the fibers from your body to your brain come from the vagus. We think of our brain as dealing with motor movement and all that. 80%, almost all of the information that your brain gets about what's going on in your body comes from the vagus, and we can treat it.
Okay, so we just covered some more recent breakthroughs that use the electrical pathways in your body to turn around gut health and related issues. Now, let's dive into an ancient and science-backed practice that also works in these pathways to heal both gut disorders and autoimmune disease.
So the microbiome is a big interest of mine. It's a fundamental starting place for people's health. And in Chinese medicine, there's a whole school of thought. They call it the spleen and stomach school, which is basically saying your digestion is the center of your health, of your whole being. So when they draw the organs in a circle, they often will put the spleen and stomach right in the center. We can treat so many things now through the microbiome. So it is such a cool place to put emphasis on, not only in Chinese medicine, but in modern medicine, because so much research is coming out on it.
So data show that we are having a huge increase in autoimmune disease. So this is where the immune system, which is really designed to help protect us from infection and things outside of the body, becomes imbalanced and starts to attack our own tissues. The way acupuncture has been shown to help is in a number of ways. So certain autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and others have a pain component that acupuncture has been shown to be very helpful with. The other aspect is that what we know about the brain is that the left hemisphere is actually more focused on increasing the immune system, and the right hemisphere is more focused on softening or decreasing the immune system. And so we actually see imbalances in brain development between the left and the right hemispheres, but also imbalances in brain activation between the left and right hemispheres that can predispose people to autoimmune conditions. And so it's now increasingly appreciated that acupuncture, by the way that it directly interfaces with the nervous system and the immune system and the hormonal system, is able to bring balance back into that system, which then has like a top-down balancing effect on the whole neurohumoral cascade.
When we have unhealthy microbiome, it creates an environment for inflammation because these pathogens, bad bacteria, parasites, all sorts of fungus, candidas, whatever it may be, it creates an environment that these start to grow, and they create an inflammatory cascade that starts in the gut.
Acupuncture can be really useful in improving functional digestive issues like acid reflux, constipation, diarrhea. There have been some really great studies showing that when we use points on the body that we've been trained to use to help digestive function, that these actually immediately through a nerve reflex actually change blood flow to the internal organs. So this has been shown in animal studies, and then symptomatically we can see improvement in research into humans, which is always funny because most acupuncturists are very familiar that if they're treating someone and they put in a few points, that we can immediately hear some gurgling sounds coming from their tummy, and that's that vagal nerve activation that's just increasing blood flow to those organs. And so it's nice to see the research backing that up. So acupuncture is known to help the balance in our immune system in a number of ways. One is that one of the most important biochemicals that is behind acupuncture's effect is something called histamine, which most people are familiar with if they get seasonal allergies. Histamine is associated with that inflammation from seasonal allergies. It's also an important neurotransmitter in the brain, and we also find a lot of it in the gut. But that's one of the main signals that acupuncture is using to get its effect. So we know from copious research, a lot of it was done by a researcher named John McDonald over in Australia, he's a PhD, that acupuncture is acting on these receptors to stimulate and then bring balance. So when it comes to immune overactivation or inflammation, so there's an increasing awareness that a lot of chronic illness is caused at a certain level by our inflammatory response being turned on kind of at a low level all the time, a bit like a smoldering fire causing damage. But what's maybe less understood is that it's not so much that we have like an on-off switch for our inflammation. We don't have it or not have it. It actually is, again, going in this like orchestrated cascade. And so let's say we have an injury or an infection. The way the body is designed is the first thing it's going to do is increase the immune system, the inflammatory response to go to that area. So we're going to turn it on and turn it up and get things there. And then once that gets to a high enough level, it's going to switch into the next phase, which is sort of, we're going to repair the area. We're going to demolish anything that's broken, and then we're going to rebuild. And then the third phase, which is really important, is the now let's turn it off bit. Right? And so what happens is that a lot of chronic inflammation at this biochemical level happens because we've not gotten to the turn it off phase. But we know that through acupuncture activating these stretch receptors, we can increase what are called resolvins, which are the signals to say, right, the inflammation has done its job, and now we need to switch it off so we don't waste resources and cause damage.
When most folks think of mushrooms, they probably think about food, like a pizza topping, or Smurf houses, or maybe just the interesting looking ground dwellers you come across in your yard or in the forest that should be stayed away from. After all, some can be poisonous. Well, the world of complementary and alternative medicine is starting to change the way we view mushrooms. They're finally setting the record straight on the vast medicinal value of certain fantastic fungi, as you're about to see.
All functional, or as also commonly referred to, medicinal mushrooms are good for immune support and gut health. Mushrooms and gut health are deeply linked. This is something that all mushrooms experts have known for a long time. The research on it to a wider public has been available for the last decade or so. So now a lot of mushroom research is around gut health, this connection between bacteria and fungi. There's a deep link between these two overlooked kingdoms. So a lot of the focus on nutrition and health has been around the battle of the macronutrients. Are fats good? Are fats bad? Are carbs good? Carbs bad. How much protein should you take? Things like that. And that's where we're only focusing on 2 out of the 6 main biological kingdoms. So we're overlooking particularly these fungal and bacterial kingdoms that often collaborate together. One common example of their collaboration from a nutrition point of view is pretty much all fermented foods. So be it beer and wine, they do have yeast. Yeast is a type of fungi that works with bacteria to create a certain outcome. So be it sauerkraut, kombucha. So mushrooms and bacteria have a long, long history together, to the point that every part of our skin and our whole gut is full of bacteria and full of fungi. And gut, being our second brain, or even actually you could say the first brain, is one of the main places where we absorb nutrients. So going back, animals, including us humans, cannot produce our own energy. We need external energy sources. Most commonly, we eat them or put them in our mouth, and through that digestive tract, we absorb those nutrients. So the digestive tract is highly sensitive, but also a vital part of how information is brought into our body. And I use the word information very specifically because the gut absorbs more than just proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. So when we put things into the body, starting with the saliva to the stomach acids and then to the digestive tract, there will be mushrooms and bacteria together there. And that is just a massive, massive part on how quickly can we absorb nutrients. And we can also observe the same thing in the forest or in nature. So what mushrooms do, besides supporting with the immunity of the forest and immunity of nature, mushrooms also help break down organic and inorganic matter. They're actually quite like the vacuum cleaners of the forest. Mushrooms have this ability to take something that is either organic or inorganic and process it. It's like a cleaning facility. And what it does is it cleans it and then breaks it to things that nature and other living beings then can utilize. So that is what they really do. They're composters. So actually a lot of these functional mushrooms grow on trees that are dead or about to die, and they're decomposing the energy from the trees into a format that some other living being, such as humans, can use. So the same happens in our gut. What they're doing is you have this influx of stuff, good or bad, good, bad, and ugly, and they're taking it and they're taking some good or bad things and breaking it down to forms that we can then utilize. Some of the specific compounds that are found in mushrooms include polysaccharides. Polysaccharides, poly means many, saccharides means sugar, and then often people freak out. It's like, I don't want more sugar in my life. But these are in the carbohydrate family, and they are technically fibers as well, but they are these very small compounds that you need in very small amounts, especially these beta-D-glucans particularly have a certain particle size that is quite fascinating. And what we know that these polysaccharides are among the most studied nutrients in the world. So we can find polysaccharides in certain grains, like I mentioned, like oats, certain berries, like let's say goji berries, but they're most abundant in these functional mushrooms. And what these beta-D-glucans seem to be doing is that you absorb them, and in the digestive tract, they produce certain harmony with bacteria, which makes sense because fungi and bacteria have this very synergistic relationship. They don't necessarily irritate, but they challenge the immune system. So they seem to have these immunomodulatory benefits to the own immune system of the body. Through the digestive tract, they kind of modulate the immune system. And modulation means that they don't stimulate or suppress, but they do whatever is needed at that time. So sometimes they stimulate, sometimes they suppress. Polysaccharides are found pretty much in some form in all of these functional mushrooms. And then each top mushroom would have their own special skills. But these functional mushrooms are not really known as an incredible source for, let's say, macronutrients or micronutrients, but they have these compounds that clearly impact human physiology. They impact our digestive tract, they can impact our cognitive function, they can impact our glands that produce hormones, they can impact blood circulation, they can impact our heart health. They're kind of like the information system. I often look at these compounds that some of them are known as adaptogens and just very bioactive compounds. They're almost like the apps in your iPhone. So if the hardware is more in nutrition made out of the macronutrients, then these are definitely like the software that makes it run in a more intelligent way. It gives guidance to the hardware. You do need the hardware. You can't have the software without the hardware, but the software does make the magic happen in many cases, especially on a short time frames.
I hope you're enjoying tonight's episode. We'll get right back into it in a second, but I wanted to take a quick moment to tell you how you can own the entire series. Below this video, you'll find a link to the full Proven docuseries as well as a bunch of powerful bonuses that you can bring into your home at a special discounted price. This also includes a Proven companion guidebook that's jam-packed with powerful takeaways and action items from each episode. It's loaded, deep dive wisdom that isn't included in our free premiere. If you're interested in bringing these powerful Proven healing solutions into your life, it's well worth checking out. Plus, the proceeds from your purchase will help us on our quest to unveil new breakthrough medicines and share this information with the world. Make sure to check it out. Now, back to tonight's episode. For thousands of years, we humans have looked to the world of plants for food, shelter, and you guessed it, medicine. We just talked about mushrooms, which many cultures would consider to be an herb, but now we're going to dive deeply into some specific medicinal herbs that have been shown in studies to hold great benefits for gut health and certain autoimmune disorders.
A lot of modern research is validating a lot of things they have thought about traditionally in Chinese medicine. Let's just talk about herbs, for example. One of the most famous formulas in Chinese medicine for IBS is a liver gut formula. Tong Xie Yao Feng Sun. It's Fang Feng, Baizhu, Qianpi, and Baixiao. It's these 4 famous herbs. But IBS it can be many different things, but that one's been researched a lot, kind of in this Western medicine model of, we have 100 people with IBS with diarrhea, and we're going to give them this formula, and 63% of them got better, and so they say, it's successful. So that's that. And then when I think of the brain, intervening on that level can be helpful as an adjunct therapy to treating IBS. If someone is completely stressed out, again, it's like, how do you treat in multiple places? And we know there's a liver-gut connection. Well, we also can use our knowledge of functional medicine and brain biochemistry to know that the GABA could be low, or maybe their serotonin is low, and we can give herbs to help that aspect, which is intelligent because then they feel better. When they feel better, they're going to deal with stress better. Their liver's going to function better. What's the liver? It's the way that we're relating to the world. It's our capacity to be present with adversity, with uncomfortableness. That has to do deeply with the liver, yin, and blood of the body. And so if we can create more capacity by having the brain biochemistry online better, then our gut's going to be healthier, and then our microbiome's going to be healthier.
One of the exciting new studies that they're talking about was the use of peppermint oil. Peppermint oil actually helps with motility, and we realize with the gut, you need to support motility, you need to support that gut lining for inflammation. And so my colleagues were really excited that, now because it's hard to deal with folks who come in with complex IBS and you have 7 minutes to deal with them. Our main things are go to the specialist who then say there's nothing wrong with your gut, go back to your primary care doctor. And then we say, well, maybe you're depressed, and we start, digging for those things. So our tool set's pretty limited, and it's frustrating because it doesn't really help patients. And so to come up with something that you can say, okay, I have a new thing to hand a patient, it was pretty exciting for my colleagues. And the funny thing is one of the things that my grandma used frequently for any type of illness, when it was any type of illness, my grandma always went through the gut. The one thing I can remember so vividly is just walking along the riverside, picking up wild mint. And because she uses peppermint in a lot of cultures and old plant medicine, I mean, that's one of the go-tos for gut health is peppermint. But it's been validated now in the conventional world to use it as part of an IBS treatment plan. And the mechanism is actually pretty brilliant. It helps motility. It helps with your bile acids to help, really clean out your gut. It has some antimicrobial effects to it, which is all the important things you need for IBS and gut health.
One of the most popular herbs in the marketplace today, which by the way is not an adaptogen, is turmeric.
Turmeric has been used in Ayurvedic medicine for 1,000 years or longer. Curry is standard food, standard Indian food. It's typically mixed with black pepper and oil, which actually enhances the absorption, which gets it into the bloodstream.
The first thing that we need to do is recognize that there are actually two different things out there. There is turmeric, which is made from the whole root, and then there is curcumin, which is a standardized extract extracted from turmeric root. Both of them are useful and both of them have therapeutic activity. Having said that, clinically, I will tell you that I get better results using a turmeric tincture or even turmeric powdering capsules than I've ever gotten using a standardized curcumin product. The problem with curcumin is, number one, curcumin is poorly absorbed and quickly excreted. So in order to overcome that problem, they then combine curcumin with things like BioPerine, which is a black pepper extract, or phosphatidylcholine, or micelles, or other things that enhance both the bioavailability of curcumin as well as the ability for the body to hold on to it so it's not excreted so rapidly. When that happens, curcumin becomes useful. But having said that, in vitro studies, curcumin is 30 times stronger than turmeric. But in vivo studies, in living organisms, all differences disappear. And as I said, clinically, I get better results. And this is over and over and over again. So I am a big fan of using turmeric. And if somebody wants to use curcumin, it certainly, as long as it has been complexed with something else to enhance bioavailability, it still has activity. But one thing I would point out is that in high doses, turmeric is gastroprotective. In high doses, curcumin actually irritates the gastric mucosa. So that is one of the differences, because since they identified the curcuminoids as the active ingredients in turmeric, in the intervening 20 or 30 years, and that was originally done kind of to patent the curcuminoids, since they did that, they've identified 15 to 20 additional active constituents in turmeric that aren't in the curcumin products that all have activity. In fact, there was a study that came out a few years ago showing that a curcumin-free turmeric product, they took all the curcuminoids out, had just as much anti-inflammatory and anti-tumor activity as did curcumin. So while there are times that I use a standardized extract, ginkgo being one of the prime ones, or milk thistle for people with serious liver damage, in many cases, the herb is the active constituent. And so turmeric is a profound anti-inflammatory. Turmeric has been shown to not only help heal gut inflammation, neuroinflammation, musculoskeletal inflammation. It is hepatoprotective, helping to protect the liver against drug-induced damage. It has nephroprotective, helping to protect the kidneys against drug-induced damage. Considering that all of our chronic degenerative disease is inflammatory in nature, I think it actually makes great sense for Americans to start using turmeric as a spice in their food on a regular basis.
I have a fair number of clients that have inflammatory bowel disease, either ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. Now, this is a scenario where I think we've got some mainstream drugs that can actually be quite helpful. There's a drug called mesalamine, for example. So I'm not against the drugs at all, but I think when you have a more comprehensive approach, then you're much less likely to have side effects, and you're much less likely to see progression or resistance develop to the drug. I actually was talking to a patient just the other day who said she's got ulcerative colitis, and her gastroenterologist said, don't take curcumin because there's no research on it. Well, there is research on curcumin and inflammatory bowel disease. In fact, there was one study that compared it to mesalamine and showed that if you took people who were stable, who had stable disease, not somebody who's in a flare, but somebody who had stable disease, who's at risk of a recurrence or a flare, and you put one group on the mesalamine and the other group on the curcumin worked just as well for preventing recurrence. Right? So there is published data on it. It doesn't interfere with the drugs. It works well with them. It complements them. I have a patient the other day that I was talking to that said he went to a mainstream gastroenterologist who said, you might as well go with the anti-TNF inhibitors and you should do it now, right? Even though he's doing fine, he's controlled on the drug, combination of the drug and the dietary supplements. He's doing fine, but the doc's like, yeah, but why not go ahead and start the Humira? Well, for one thing, you have to get injections. It costs thousands of dollars a year, and it could increase your risk of cancer and TB. So let me think about it.
Before we get to our next healing breakthrough, we have a quick special report from Dr. Mark Hyman on how to take care of your health and vitality during these unprecedented times. Because we are unable to meet in person due to pandemic safety measures, I met with Dr. Hyman via a Zoom call the other day to glean his knowledge. Here's a pearl of wisdom that he had to share with us.
So just to start, 10,000 foot view, we're all being told a lot of different approaches to staying healthy right now, whether it's from the president, whether it's from the CDC, whether it's from our favorite health guru. There's a lot of information going around right now. How on earth do we navigate this as lay people? How do we figure out what we should be doing to stay healthy and stay sane?
Well, Mark Twain said that the problem with common sense is it's not too common. And I think if we all slow down and follow common sense, we're going to be okay. The things that actually we know already, clearly from science, that support our health and our immune system are now more important than ever, right? Aside from the social distancing and hand washing and the masks, how do you actually make yourself more resilient? How do you support your immune system to be able to fight COVID-19? Because 97% of the people who die are sick. They're either obese, overweight, or they have a chronic disease that's related to being older, which is usually associated with poor metabolic health, which is basically like being obese. So it's called being over fat. So if your metabolic health is poor, you are a sitting duck for the coronavirus. It will attack you, and you basically will lead to a more catastrophic result, more serious illness. In fact, people who are overweight or who are obese or have chronic diseases are basically pre-inflamed. So their immune system is already jacked up. Belly fat is an inflammation factory. And that's 88% of America. Okay, so we're kind of in a bad situation. That's why we're seeing, so many people dying and so many people in hospitals. And I think the key here is to how do you create a healthy immune system? And it's simple. It's eating a whole foods, plant-rich diet. And there's a lot of tweaks on there about how to do that. And I've written an entire blog about how do you build a resilient immune system. You can find it at drhyman.com/C19 about which foods to eat to help and so forth, which spices to use. But essentially it's cutting out the crap, processed food, comfort foods. And I've seen people, putting on the COVID-19, right? I mean, these are people who are just eating to comfort themselves in a time of stress. And it's the worst possible time to do that. So it's time to double down on your health in terms of nutrition. And that's really, really critical, important. And sugar and starch are immune destroyers. People who are overweight shed virus longer, their immune systems are suppressed, they're more likely to be sicker and ending up in the hospital, in the ICU, and have respiratory failure. And they also are not as effectively responding to vaccines. So people don't understand that if you are poor metabolic health, or if you're older, you might not respond well to a vaccine. And then it's the other obvious things. Make sure you get adequate sleep, because sleep is important for immune system function. Make sure you meditate or do some form of deep, profound relaxation, because that's when your stress levels go down and that helps your immune system. Make sure you exercise, not run a marathon, but do moderate exercise every day. Also helps your immune system. take some basic supplements that help. We know that from the research that these do have impact in the risk of viral infections and the recovery from viral infections. I was speaking to one of my colleagues at Tufts, the dean of the Tufts School of Nutrition Science and Policy, who is trying to do a trial on 2,000 patients of some really key nutrients that we know may have important impact: zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D, green tea catechins, quercetin, simple stuff that you can take without breaking the bank or taking 4,000 pills. And those are really the simple things. And the other part is stay connected, because our emotional health and connecting to people we love is so important. You know, I found a friend of mine in town. We stayed 6 feet apart. We had masks on, and we went for a hike. And we called another friend I hadn't seen since this all started, and we just had the greatest time being out in the woods and sharing time together. Now, there's lots of people who say, well, don't do that, but I think even by Zoom or other FaceTime technologies, we can actually start to connect with each other more. So I think all those principles are really critical if we're going to understand what to do. And then, of course, there's all the nonsense about this drug and that drug, and should you inject disinfectant into your blood, or should you get a vaccine? Those questions are challenging, and I think there's a lot of challenge with treating viral infections with medications. It can be done sometimes, but it's a nominal effect. The only drug that's been sort of provisionally approved is remdesivir, which didn't have any mortality benefit. I mean, it didn't save anybody's life. And it reduced the hospital stays in the ICU from 15 to 11 days, which is not really dramatic, let's say. And so we really need to be focusing on what we can do for our own health. And of course, then there's the issues around testing and the issues around social distancing and the issues around when we were open. And the fact is that we just don't know. This is a moving target, and it's changing constantly. I spoke to a researcher in Italy who was a little bit ahead of us in this curve. And he was saying things that were just shocking to me, like a lot of patients who have COVID-19, but their tests are all negative, and they're very, very sick, but they can't find the virus. So they present exactly the same way, exactly the same symptoms, but it's a moving target. So I think we're learning and we're adapting. And if anybody tells you they know for sure anything, then just don't listen and ignore all those conspiracy theories, because it's just such a distraction. And I think we need to be focused on what we can do to our health. And I think, I've done a lot of thinking about this, but the fact that we are such a sick society, the fact that we come pre-inflamed, the fact that 75% of us are overweight and 42% are obese, the fact that 6 out of 10 Americans have a chronic disease that's mostly caused by bad food. In a sense, the reason we're shut down, the reason, we can't be at work, the reason our economy has lost trillions of dollars, the reason our world is sort of falling apart in some ways, is because of our food and our food system. And if we all had a great diet, this would be, a nominal infection that would be more or less like the flu. But it's not, because we're all so sick, and it preys on people who have poor metabolic health. So it's important to think of COVID as a diet controllable and related disease, both in terms of the macronutrient food you're eating and the quality of the food, and also micronutrients. So jacking up your nutrition now is more important than ever. And every day I'm cooking up a storm with all kinds of foods that I know are going to boost my immune system. Ginger and garlic and rosemary and spices and turmeric. And I make a lot of Indian curries and just tons. I made Chinese food last night with, basically ginger and garlic and red peppers and spices. And I think, this is what we can be doing now to actually help ourselves.
Thanks for the knowledge, Dr. Hyman. Now for our next healing breakthrough. Given the area of the body that we're focusing on, it may not shock you that one of the best ways to heal your gut, and by extension, autoimmune disorders, is through food and nutrition. I don't know about you, but I wasn't taught that food is medicine in grade school. Yes, we got some basic direction on eating your vegetables and that junk food wasn't the best, but the notion of a macrobiotic diet or superfood nutrition, food sensitivity, intestinal permeability, they weren't quite there yet. And for that matter, the world at large still isn't. No matter where you're at with your nutrition chops, buckle up, let's dive into our number one modality for this episode. We're about to broaden the horizons of what you put on your dinner plate.
we do need better research in nutrition. We absolutely need to prove that people can thrive on different dietary styles so that people can understand that, what I'm seeing on Instagram is real. Like, I'm seeing so many people on Instagram thriving on vegan diets and thriving on carnivore diets. Who's right? Well, turns out that humans are designed to adapt to different dietary availability. So, now we need to show that these different dietary styles are, in fact, useful for treating different disease states. That we need evidence for. But I'm seeing people get better with autoimmune paleo diet. I'm seeing people improve their health on a carnivore diet. I'm seeing people thrive on vegetarian vegan diets. And the question is who's right and what's right for each individual? That's the next generation of nutrition research that's coming.
This is the future of health. True preventative medicine, where we understand the underlying chemical cause of chronic diseases, one, and second, be able to prevent that, right? So that we don't manage diseases, we actively prevent them and reverse them just using natural approaches like food. What I would like everyone to think about is that the human body is an ecosystem. We have our own genes, which should not be ignored. We have our own immune system, which is extremely central to not only fighting off the infections, but interacting with the gut microbiome and interacting with our own cells. And then we have nutrition, and then we have the gut microbiome. So those are sort of the core big pieces of who we are, right? And if you just study any one piece, you're going to help some people to some degree, but you're not going to help all people to the entire degree. So there are microorganisms that are known to produce vitamin B12, for example, right? And so there's this big movement these days of veganism, and people who are critical of veganism, they say, well, we have to eat meat because plants do not make B12, right? And that seems like a legitimate argument. It turns out that gut microbiome members are perfectly capable of making vitamin B12, and people can be completely plant-based. The challenge is in modern life, we have wiped out a lot of those members by over-consuming antibiotics and preservatives and being too sterile, right? And so people who don't have those bacteria, unfortunately, they have to supplement. But the natural human microbiome is perfectly capable of providing us with 100% of our vitamin B12 needs. And so we have, for example, the knowledge of which microbial pathways, so these are systems of enzymes produced by the microbiome, are capable of producing vitamin B12. So we can actually tell whether one of our customers' microbiomes is producing vitamin B12 or not, right? So that's one example. The same thing with vitamin K and vitamin B6 and 3 and so on. Let's go to another example that I really like. We've all heard of people who are anemic, and modern medicine says, well, you don't absorb iron. Like, you take a lot of iron, but you don't absorb it, right? And again, what's really frustrating is that that's considered bad luck, right? Or that's a myth, right? It's not a myth. Iron is a chemical, right? And it needs to cross the barrier between the intestinal lumen and our blood, right? And so it's not some magic, but that doesn't happen in some people. And it turns out that enterobacteria, which have members in E. coli and Shigella and Salmonella, these are all considered bad bacteria. For example, most people would consider E. coli to be bad bacteria. E. coli are essential members of our gut microbiome. They're absolutely essential. And here's one reason why they're essential. Because the way they acquire iron in the gut lumen is that they produce molecules called siderophores. These are small molecules that are produced by E. coli that are released in the lumen, and these molecules seek out iron. They're literally like little probes. When they find iron, they grab it. And E. coli has the ability to then grab back this siderophore when it has iron, when it carries it, right? But it doesn't have arms to go out and grab it. The siderophore has to come back with iron in sort of a random fashion. It turns out that our mitochondria that originated from bacteria billions of years ago have the exact same mechanism. They can grab that same siderophore, which when it carries iron can cross into the bloodstream, and our own cells can harvest that iron. So now, here you have an example of where bacteria in our gut that are considered bad by many are producing essential nutrients that are harvesting iron from our food, bringing it into our body, and allowing us to harvest it. How cool is that? On the flip side, there are bacteria that can produce bad things. For example, the same E. coli, right, can produce lipopolysaccharide. So these are known, very well known in the literature to be pro-inflammatory, meaning that they stimulate our immune system to go haywire and to simply overreact to things for no reason. So if you look at one bacterium, such as E. coli, we can now fine-tune its metabolism by saying, we're going to feed this E. coli with foods that contain molecules that enable it to produce these siderophores and harvest iron, and we can participate in that activity. But we're going to deny it foods that it uses to produce lipopolysaccharide that will hyperactivate our immune system unnecessarily. Think of the gut microbiome not as a collection of bacteria. What it is a collection of thousands of chemical reactions that produce beneficial or detrimental chemicals in our intestines. And so now this demystifies the microbiome into chemical reactions, the input of which is molecules found in food, and the output of which modulates our health. That is basically the concept of tuning or modulating the functions of the gut microbiome using nothing but nutrition. And so we started Viome 3 years ago, and it's just been sort of a fairy tale so far. We have currently 2 clinical tests, one for stool, one for blood, and we're bringing 2 additional clinical tests to the market. One is for blood and one is for saliva. And so it's just been an incredible journey where we've put together a world-class team of microbiologists and technologists and nutritionists and translational scientists, and then very importantly, machine learning AI data scientist type to put all that together. And we've converted this sort of magic mystery and lore of gut microbiome and nutrition and different diets into chemistry and math, right? So if you perform large studies, which we have done at Viome, that correlate this chemical output of the microbiome to disease and health, and understand what's healthy and what's not healthy at the chemical level, you can now tune the activity of every person's microbiome using nutrition to produce mostly healthy biochemicals and very few, if any, detrimental biochemicals. And so today, when a customer provides their stool sample, for example, right, and we measure the 3,000 chemical reactions that their gut microbiome is performing, the computer will 100% automatically compute exactly what food that person should be eating and what food ingredients that person should not be eating, 100% automated using chemistry and math. So we're currently setting up 7 RCTs where specifically we're trying to treat diseases using nothing but nutrition, meaning that 100% of everything you need to treat a disease can be bought at Whole Foods, for example. Let's talk about dysbiosis, right? So it's a very commonly used term, microbiome dysbiosis, and people have been using it in the context of composition, meaning they compare a group of sick people with healthy individuals and they try to find the differences and say, oh, these people are sick because they have gut microbiome dysbiosis. They're somehow different from people who are not sick. It turns out that's not the case. In our studies, we can't go to someone who has IBS and say, you have an IBS microbiome, sorry, you're going to have IBS. That is not the case. They, in fact, do not have an IBS microbiome. What they do have is that they're performing biochemical functions that healthy people gut microbiomes are not performing. And very importantly, vice versa. Their microbiomes are not performing functions that healthy people microbiomes are. So we have 2 sets of biochemical reactions, one where it's more pronounced than in healthy people, and the other one it's missing, whereas in healthy people it isn't. And so now we have that signature, and that's the functional dysbiosis associated with the disease. And what's really cool about that functional dysbiosis is that you don't need to try to change their microbiome. All you have to do is feed it a different diet, meaning you feed every person's microbiome what it needs to start producing the beneficial, healthy chemicals that we see healthy people microbiomes producing, and deny them food that person's microbiome uses to produce detrimental chemicals that are associated with the disease, right? And that's how our algorithms sort foods into eat versus do not eat. If that person's microbiome is going to use some molecule in wheat to produce something bad that's associated with the disease, don't eat the wheat. Deprive the microbiome of that. And once you deprive it with the building blocks of that reaction, they can't make it. They don't make chemicals out of thin air. And every single person's microbiome is going to require different nutrition because they're all different compositionally and they take in different foods and make different things from them.
Whoa, our experts went deep in this episode. There's a lot we learned, so let's recap. First off, managing a chronic condition is not easy, and often everyday tasks can become challenging. We are now experiencing an epidemic of autoimmune disease, and Dr. Carnahan shared that it's now one of the top 10 leading causes of death in women. No matter which specific tissue is impacted, the root cause of autoimmune disease is the same: genetics, gut dysbiosis and inflammation, then a trigger. Dr. O'Brien blew us away with the hard science on the microbiome. Get this, cell to cell, we're outnumbered 10 to 1. But gene to gene, we're outnumbered 100 to 1. We then dove into our proven solutions, beginning with biofeedback. Dr. Pepper talked about this technique being a remarkable way to gain insight into our physiology by learning to consciously alter unconscious processes. For digestive disturbances, like irritable bowel syndrome, abdominal pain, any gastrointestinal distress, research shows an 80% success rate after just 6 biofeedback sessions. He reminded us to breathe lower and slower, not necessarily deeper, to decrease the alarm bells and enhance peristalsis, or the natural rhythm of our digestion. We then explored electromedicine with Dr. McMakin, the founder of frequency-specific microcurrent, giving us the download on the vagus nerve. This incredible nerve network helps to quiet our immune system from overreacting, it slows our heart rate, and improves our digestion. She told us about SIBO, or small intestine bacterial overgrowth, where the bacteria in your gut basically go into a VIP area and throw a crazy party that hurts your health. Next, we explored the 5,000 plus year old wisdom of acupuncture. Dr. Mel shared the research of predisposition to autoimmune disease from brain imbalances. Your left brain is more specialized to increase the immune system when needed, and the right brain on softening the immune system or turning it off when not needed. Makes sense that a balanced brain is important to our immune status. She said that acupuncture has a top-down effect and directly interfaces with the nervous, immune, and endocrine systems simultaneously. Not stopping there, acupuncture needling immediately shifts the blood flow to the internal organs through a nerve reflex via, you already know it, the vagus nerve. That grumbling belly sound during a session is a sign of vagal nerve stimulation. More research has revealed that acupuncture works on histamine, which plays a role in inflammation and allergies, but also increases resolvin levels. These are little chemical messengers derived from omega-3 fatty acids, which are known to reduce inflammation. Tero then shared with us the science on functional mushrooms and that we are all overlooking this crucial biological kingdom. Fungi and bacteria have long collaborated, and it goes beyond just beer and winemaking. Mushrooms provide prebiotics, which feed gut bacteria. From triterpenes to polysaccharides such as beta-glucans, mushrooms are nutrient dense. Think about what mushrooms do in the forest. They are decomposers, transforming organic and inorganic materials into usable forms for ecosystems, whether that be the forest or your belly. He told us about reishi, or Ganoderma lucidum. This famous fungi has been celebrated in Asia for eons, and science has proven this to be for good reason. This mushroom contains high concentrations of triterpenes, which is why it's so shiny to begin with, endowing it with phenomenal immunomodulating properties. This means that it's a smart herb and can signal your body to calm down during an immune overreaction, or stimulate it into action when your immune system's being a little sluggish. Interestingly enough, this mushroom is even helpful in a common yeast overgrowth condition known as candida. We then probed the depths of herbal medicine. Jason Blaylock told us about the spleen-stomach school of traditional Chinese medicine. They knew a long time ago that your gut was vitally important and that it must be strong for your immunity to be strong. He spoke about 3 herbs that are known to increase small intestinal absorption when cooked together and even create a new molecule. These are Hu Wengxi, Astragalus, Chai Hu, and Sheng Ma. In TCM, liver pathology also can impact digestion and cause problems. Who knew that treating the liver would be good for the gut? Well, Asian physicians knew a few thousand years ago. Dr. Martinez then told us stories of her foraging for yerba buena, or wild mint, with her grandmother when she was a child. We now know that peppermint oil helps with motility, cools inflammation, cleans the gut, and has antimicrobial activity. We learned about turmeric and the well-studied family of curcuminoids found in high levels in this root. Tons of studies have shown that curcumin is more bioavailable for absorption by the body when it is combined with black pepper and oil, or fat. David Winston was quick to note that in high doses, turmeric is a gastroprotective, whereas curcumin is a gastroirritant. So there is more to turmeric than curcumin, and he shared research demonstrating that curcumin-free turmeric had as much anti-inflammatory and anti-tumor activity as curcumin itself. He also transmitted an ancient secret. Many have heard that combining turmeric with long pepper and oil makes it more bioavailable, but the ancient Ayurvedic doctors actually traditionally used ginger as a substitute for salt or in addition to it. We then moved to our number one modality for gut and autoimmune disease, nutrition. Dr. Tom told us about the 17-year lag between published research data reaching your local neighborhood doc. From the work of Dr. Ebinger, Dr. Tom and the rest of the world learned of molecular mimicry, which is one of the mechanisms of autoimmune disease. This is where a microbe mimics part of the body. So when our immune system targets those pathogenic agents, it also attacks our own tissue. He then dropped a knowledge bomb, citing the work of Dr. Alessio Fasano, the father of intestinal permeability, whose recent work documents that all disease begins in the leaky gut. We then learned that our microbiome actually educates our immune system, training it to target specific bacteria and viruses. Momo then unlocks the keys to understanding the microbiome. It's a collection of chemical processes that are either beneficial or detrimental, and ultimately, there's no such thing as good or bad when it comes to microbes. E. coli, for instance, plays a significant role in how we absorb iron, a needed nutrient. But in other instances, E. coli produces lipopolysaccharides, or LPs, which are pro-inflammatory molecules. What matters is the ratio of microorganisms and probably 1,000 other variables we are just beginning to discover. Even our mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells, are bacterial in origin. Somewhere down the line, we formed a commensal relationship with them to benefit both of our needs. Momo then went on to share how we co-evolved with these microbes, and that it's why, even though we are such advanced and complex creatures, we have fewer genes than a worm. Like I said, we covered a ton in this episode. Okay, 2 more things before we go. 1, make sure to click the button below this video to find out how you can bring all 9 episodes of our Proven docuseries, plus a bunch of powerful bonus resources into your home for life. Every one of us deserves to know the full spectrum of healing options that are out there for us, and the information in this series is something you will want to come back to again and again whenever an illness arises in your circle, be it your own health or that of your family and friends. You can own the digital, the physical, or the all-access package at a special discounted price during this event only. Now is the time. Lastly, what proven healing secrets do we have coming up next? Tomorrow night, we air episode 3, and this one is dedicated solely to that beautiful organ that resides in between your ears, your brain. We'll also be going into some of the more serious brain conditions that many people are struggling with, such as Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. This is going to be a truly powerful exploration that will literally change your mind. I can't wait. Can you? See you tomorrow.